Why walk when you can ride? It's one of the most iconic lines in Morrowind, and you hear it when you use Silt Striders for travel. They are the first fast travel method introduced in the game, and you encounter one right in Seydanin. It's actually one of the first things you notice when you step onto the docks. The huge bug with the long legs is definitely not something you can miss. Even while walking around Seydanin, you constantly hear its strange sounds in the background. Every time I see a Silt Strider, it feels like a perfect match for a world like Morrowind. Just think about it. The fauna and flora of Morrowind are completely different from our world. There are no hunting wolves or deer grazing in the distance, and I honestly cannot imagine having a normal horse-drawn carriage here. Everywhere you look, you see giant mushrooms or weird creatures like flying jellyfish called bolnage, cliff racers, and guars. So when it comes to travel, it makes sense that it would be something special too. The creature needs to be large enough to carry several people and some luggage, and it also has to be resilient enough to survive the harsh conditions of Vvardenfell. I also checked unofficial Elder Scrolls pages to see what more information I could find. According to them, their thick carapace helps them survive the brutal environment of Vvardenfell. They even managed to survive the Ash Blight, which wiped out many native creatures, including the Cliff Striders. And honestly, take the Tribunal we play Morrowind after that event. Just imagine having some Cliff Striders on top of regular Cliff Racers. As if Cliff Racers weren't already ruining my jumping journeys enough. I actually found some screenshots taken from Elder Scrolls Online, and judging by their facial expressions, they look like they love to annoy people. But let's focus on our friendly bug creatures. Even their name, Silt Strider, is perfectly chosen. Let's break it down. First, silt is a mineral particle sized between sand and clay. It's loose and dusty. When dry, it feels almost like very fine sand or flour. It can be blown around by wind, creating dust storms or settling in layers. When wet, silt feels soft and muddy like sloppy clay. It can be slippery or unstable, so things can sink into it easily. Basically, it can make the ground really tricky to walk on. And strider just means something that walks or moves easily with long steps. Put together, a Silt Strider is basically a creature that can walk across soft, unstable terrain without getting stuck. In Morrowind, that makes perfect sense. Vvardenfell is full of swamps, ashlands, muddy coasts, and river deltas, which would make traveling with carts or horses a real challenge. These giant, long-legged arthropods are perfectly built for it. Their huge legs can step over obstacles and soft, unstable ground without any problems. I really love that even their name makes sense. It's basically a natural explanation for why giant, long-legged creatures are perfect for traveling through Vvardenfell swamps, ashlands, and coasts. If you look at the towns where Silt Striders operate, almost everyone is near a water source except for Margan and Aldrun. But those two are in the ashlands, which works too because ash is kind of like a silt desert. To get to those places, you'd probably have to first reach Kul along the coast, which sits right next to the ashlands, and from there continue to Margan and Aldrun. Technically, we have Foyada, the canyons carved out by lava that could have a lot of ash to step into, but they look pretty rocky to me. So I'm not sure if it would be possible for Silt Striders to use them to go from Balmora to Aldrun without going around the island. The fast travel time from Balmora to Aldrun suggests a pretty straight path, but that time could basically just be set by the developers based on the distance between towns, not the actual route you would have to take. It's also possible that Silt Striders can travel on any surface, but they are fastest on silt areas and probably only use other surfaces when necessary. Actually, according to unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, there's a Silt Strider Caravaner log in Elder Scrolls Online that records a few days of travel. It starts in Seydanin, goes to Balmora, then Narmok, Nisus, Kul, Margan, and finally Telvos. That matches what I expected. You visit Margan after stopping in Kul. Interestingly, it mentions Narmok and Telvos. They don't have official Silt Strider stops during the time when we explore Vvardenfell, but they are right on the coastline, so technically a Silt Strider could reach those places as well. I also like that we don't have a Silt Strider in Caldera because it isn't located near areas with silt or muddy ground. I imagine the rocky terrain of the Westgash region is just too rough for them. That's probably why we don't see any Silt Striders on the east side of the map. Molaka Moor with its volcanic rock and lava pools is definitely too harsh for them to travel through. The Azura coast is made up of rocky islands, and besides the hard ground, I don't think Silt Striders have legs long enough to cross the deep water between them. Even the grazelands, which looks like normal grassy ground, is probably still a bit too solid for them to move comfortably. I love that someone probably thought about all those details while designing Silt Striders and their stops to make everything come together. And Silt Striders are such a perfect way to travel in the game. You don't don't open a menu and magically teleport somewhere. You go to a living creature that exists in the landscape, talk to the driver, and choose where you want to go. It feels intentional, like travel is something that actually happens in this world. And from what I've heard, if you use the right mods, you can even watch the whole journey. What I really love is how Silt Striders teach you the map naturally. They don't take you everywhere. They only connect certain towns. So over time, you start learning where towns are, between which there is a travel connection and where you actually need to walk or use another transport method. You slowly build a mental map of Vvardenfell without even realizing it. They also add a lot to the culture and atmosphere. Different towns depend on them. They feel like part of the economy, not just a convenience feature. It makes the world feel alive and functional. If you compare this to Skyrim or Oblivion, the difference is pretty clear. Instant fast travel is convenient, sure, but it completely removes the sense of distance and breaks immersion. Silt Striders respect your time while still keeping the scale of the world intact. You travel faster, but you never forget how big and strange Morrowind actually is. And that's why Silt Striders are perfect. They are practical, immersive, and deeply tied to the world's identity. They don't break immersion, they enhance it. Just like so many other systems in Morrowind, they don't just help you move through the world, they help you understand it. You can even find Silt Strider shells spread across Vvardenfell, which makes you question what happened to those creatures. Did they die during travel, or maybe these are corpses of wild Silt Striders? You start imagining Vvardenfell with wild Silt Striders and wonder what happened to them. Could they have natural predators that drove them nearly to extinction? According to the lore page, they don't have many predators, so that probably isn't it. Maybe it's like with wild horses in our world. They are rare because of overhunting and habitat loss. Could the Dunmer and Vvardenfell have hunted Silt Striders for different purposes, like using their hard shells and architecture? That actually makes sense. Just look at Aldrun, where the manor district is made from one huge shell of an emperor crab. I checked info about those creatures too, and apparently House Redoran claims to have hunted those giant crabs to extinction. The description also mentions that the shells were famously used in construction, so I guess not just for the manor district. If you look at the models of mudcrab front and back and compare them to some of the buildings in Aldrun, you can definitely see the resemblance. So, are all the buildings actually shells from insects? After digging a bit deeper, it turns out Redoran villages are built from local materials with organic curves and undecorated exteriors inspired by the landscape and by the shells of giant native insects they claim to have killed long ago. So it sounds more like they were just inspired by the shapes of insects when designing their buildings. On the other hand, isn't a bug shell also considered a local material? Even more interesting, the Aldrun Mages Guild looks like a bigger version of a Silt Strider. So maybe Redoran hunters had something to do with the disappearance of wild Silt Striders, since, as I just showed you, House Redoran was inspired by the shells of giant native insects they say they killed long ago. The Silt Strider lore page also mentions that their limbs can be attached to ships for deep-sea fishing, and the young ones' legs can even be used as fishing rods. Oh, and their musk is used as perfume. I guess it might attract unwanted attention, as musk is produced by Silt Striders to attract mates. And besides all those usages of Silt Strider parts, we also have chitin armor in Morrowind, which is constructed by laminating several layers of insect shell glued with organic resins. And giant Silt Strider shells sound like a perfect material. I even checked Wikipedia, and the exoskeleton of arthropods in real life contains chitin, which confirms that Silt Strider shells could be used to create armor. So maybe the way the Dunmer used Silt Striders in daily life suggests they hunted them. Or maybe they just scavenged parts from dead ones. You can often find Silt Strider shells in Ashelander camps, where they are probably used as shelter, storage, or for other purposes. But again, they could just be using shells they found, not necessarily hunting and live Silt Striders. We can find them too, right? And when I think more about those shells, you know what? They might not even be from dead Silt Striders at all. Some arthropods in real life actually shed their shells as they grow. This process is called molting. Since their shell is rigid, it doesn't grow with them. When an arthropod outgrows it, it splits the old shell, usually along the back, and crawls out. After molting, the new shell is soft for a short time, which makes them vulnerable, and then it hardens. What do you think? Why are there no wild Silt Striders wandering around? Was it just hard to implement them in the game, or is there an actual in-law reason? If you know more, or if there are more in the box that talk about this, let me know. I would love to hear it. But just look at how adding a few Silt Strider shells around Vvardenfell, some Redoran buildings that look like such a shell, plus shells in Ashelander camps creates history. It shows that Silt Striders are a strong part of the Danmar's life. It also makes you ask questions, look for clues, and come up with theories about why we can find Silt Strider shells but never actually see a living wild one. That's what I call awesome world building. Oh, and do you like talking about theories like that? If so, feel free to join the Discord server I created this year. It's dedicated to chats about Morrowind, other retro games, and more. You can find the link in the channel and video descriptions. Hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, thanks for watching.